Imagine yourself in the shoes of Giovanni, a man scarred by emotional wounds and a turbulent past, struggling to rebuild his life amidst the solitary routine of working as a pizza delivery driver. He's lost contact with his children, been devastated by an addiction that nearly destroyed him, and lives in the shadow of a series of poor choices that have driven him away from everything he once loved. Yet, a spark of hope emerges in the form of a small act of kindness. One night, as he helps an elderly woman change a tire on a dimly lit street, Giovanni has no idea that his life is about to change drastically. This simple action sets him on an unexpected journey, where the kindness he offered returns to him in ways he never could have imagined. Throughout the story, you'll be invited to follow this emotional journey of redemption and transformation. Giovanni will discover that even in the shadows of his past, the future can hold second chances. His story reminds us that life can surprise us, bringing light where there was once darkness, and that a single act of kindness can spark a chain of events that changes not just one life, but many around it. Get ready for a touching narrative that explores the power of overcoming adversity, the importance of compassion, and the relentless pursuit of a fresh start. Giovanni is more than just an ordinary man, he is an example of how life, despite all its challenges, always offers a chance to begin again. Giovanni, a middle-aged man, worked as a delivery driver for a pizzeria while living a solitary life. He had lost contact with his children due to his drug addiction, and his only friend was a neighbor, Mr. Almeida, who had helped him gradually overcome his addiction. One day, returning from work, he helped an elderly woman trying to change her car tire. As he got closer, Giovanni realized she was a loyal customer of the pizzeria where he worked. However, he had no idea what that act of kindness would mean for his life. Giovanni lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. Since childhood, he had faced physical and verbal abuse from his biological parents. At the age of 9, he ran away from home and ended up in an orphanage, trapped in the adoption system, which was also not a welcoming place. Due to life's hardships and the lack of a loving family, Giovanni fell into the world of drugs during his teenage years, developing an addiction that accompanied him through much of his adult life. Even so, he met the love of his life and married young, having 2 beautiful children, Laura and Mateus. However, life dealt a harsh blow to Giovanni. His tumultuous path with drugs cost him his marriage and the custody of his children. Over time, Giovanni lost contact with his ex-wife and children and hadn't spoken to them for years. Despite all the adversities, Giovanni nurtured a dream to improve the lives of others. With the dream of studying pharmacy since he was young, he had developed a project for a patent for a patch that helped people overcome addiction, although he had not yet succeeded because the investment required to develop the patch was very high. In the simple house where he lived, Giovanni woke up every day with the hope that it would be the day when everything would change. At 32 years old, he worked as a delivery driver for a local pizzeria, where he was known not only for his efficiency but also for the kindness with which he treated colleagues and customers. Each delivery was an opportunity for him to forget his own pain a little, focusing on the needs of others. On a suffocating summer afternoon, Giovanni parked his motorcycle in front of the mansion of a regular customer, Mrs. Marissa. She was an elderly woman with gray hair and a warm smile that always brightened his day. "Hi, Giovanni, it's good to see you again," Mrs. Marissa greeted, receiving the pizza with gratitude. "You look tired today, is everything okay?" Giovanni smiled, despite the fatigue he felt. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Marissa, just another busy day. I hope this pizza makes your day better." Mrs. Marissa looked at him sympathetically. She knew Giovanni had a difficult history but admired his strength and the way he always found a way to keep going. "You're incredible, Giovanni. I don't know how you manage to keep that smile every day." Ah, it's the job, you know. There's always someone who needs something. I'm happy to help in any way I can, Giovanni replied modestly, adjusting his helmet. You're not just a delivery driver, Giovanni. I'm sure there's much more behind that smile. I hope one day you see that too, Mrs. Marissa said softly, looking into his eyes with an understanding expression. Giovanni was touched by Mrs. Marissa's words. She seemed to see beyond the surface, something few people took the time to do. Thank you, Mrs. Marissa. I guess I try to do the best I can with what I have. As they said goodbye, Giovanni mounted his motorcycle and left, leaving Mrs. Marissa thoughtful on the sidewalk. She had seen many stories over the years, but something about Giovanni intrigued her. As night began to fall over the tall buildings of the city, Giovanni continued his delivery journey. Each pizza delivered was a step towards an uncertain future, but he held on to the hope that one day, somehow, his life would find a greater purpose than he ever imagined possible. Additionally, his friendship with his neighbor had become an anchor in Giovanni's life. He found financial stability, even though his social life was limited. If it weren't for Mr. Almeida, his longtime neighbor and friend, he would have felt completely isolated. That particular gentleman played a crucial role in his journey of recovering from addiction. He was the one who recommended Giovanni for the job at the pizzeria, knowing Giovanni needed a daily occupation and a stable job. On calm days between pizza deliveries, Giovanni often passed by the yard where Mr. Almeida tended his plants. The relationship between them was one of deep reciprocal gratitude. While Giovanni found a sense of purpose helping Mr. Almeida with small household tasks, such as fixing a fence or pruning shrubs, Mr. Almeida appreciated Giovanni's company and dedication. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Giovanni parked his motorcycle in front of Mr. Almeida's house. He carried a bag with some tools he had promised to lend to fix a shelf for his friend. Hey, Giovanni, did you bring the tools? I've been eager to fix that shelf, exclaimed Mr. Almeida, appearing at the garage door with contagious enthusiasm. Of course, Mr. Almeida, here they are, Giovanni handed over the tools. As they worked together on the shelf, they talked about life and the small pleasures of everyday existence. Mr. Almeida always treated Giovanni like part of his own family, a gesture Giovanni deeply valued. At the end of the afternoon, with the shelf properly fixed, Giovanni prepared to leave and start his shift at the pizzeria. Thank you once again for helping me, Giovanni. Your friendship means a lot to us, said Mr. Almeida, accompanying him to the door. The pleasure was mine, Mr. Almeida. It's always good to spend time with you, Giovanni replied, genuinely touched by his friend's warm hospitality. That night, after an exhausting shift delivering pizzas, Giovanni was riding his old motorcycle back home through the dark, poorly lit streets. The day had been long and tiring, and he longed for a moment of rest before another day of work. As he rounded a curve, his thoughts turned to the episode of his favorite series, released that day, which he was eager to watch when he got home. But then, a sight made him brake abruptly by the roadside. An elderly woman was struggling to change the flat tire of her car. The street light revealed her evident frustration as she tried in vain to loosen the bolts with a rusty wrench. Something about that woman seemed familiar to him. Giovanni hesitated for a moment, with his conscience telling him to move on and take care of his own interests. But something about the helplessness of that woman deeply moved him. With a sigh, Giovanni turned his motorcycle around and stopped behind her car. Good evening, ma'am, it looks like you're having a little problem here, he said with a gentle smile as he approached. The elderly woman looked at him with gratitude mixed with surprise. Oh, Giovanni. I'm so glad you stopped. I've been trying to change this tire for ages, but these bolts just won't budge. Giovanni was startled by this, because he hadn't introduced himself to the woman. It was then that he finally realized it was Mrs. Marissa, the loyal customer of the pizzeria. Mrs. Marissa, what a shock! I hardly recognized you. Can I give you a hand with this? Let me try. He positioned his motorcycle next to the car to better illuminate the area and crouched beside the flat tire, preparing to start. Mrs. Marissa, visibly relieved, accepted Giovanni's help. She explained that she was returning from a visit to the market when she noticed the flat tire. These things always happen when you least expect it. And you, Giovanni, tell me more about your life. Our conversations during pizza deliveries are always so brief, she said. Giovanni then began to talk about his life, his work at the pizzeria, and his friendship with Mr. Almeida. Also, my biggest dream is to study pharmacy and develop the patent for a patch to help people in the fight against addiction. I, unfortunately, had to face it, and if it weren't for Mr. Almeida, I don't know if I would have recovered, he said. The elderly woman listened attentively, perceiving the daily struggle he faced in his words. You are a very kind man, Giovanni. It's rare to see someone so willing to help these days, commented Mrs. Marissa, as she watched Giovanni changing the tire. Giovanni smiled, focusing on the task, but grateful for the conversation that eased the tension of the moment. I've learned that kindness can make a big difference. Mr. Almeida taught me that. He helped me out of the deepest hole I've ever been in. As he tightened the last bolts, Giovanni felt a sense of accomplishment for being able to help someone who, like him, faced unexpected challenges. With a final turn, he stood up and cleaned his hands. There you go, Mrs. Marissa. Your tire is changed and ready to go, announced Giovanni, satisfied with a job well done. The elderly woman approached, thanking him warmly. Thank you so much, Giovanni. God bless you for your kindness. I don't have any money with me, otherwise, I would reward you for your help. On the next delivery, I promise to give you a generous tip. It was nothing, Mrs. Marissa. I just did what anyone would do. No need to thank me, replied Giovanni modestly, though his heart filled with gratitude for being able to do something good that night. With a friendly wave, Mrs. Marissa got into her car and slowly drove down the poorly lit street. Giovanni watched until the car disappeared in the distance, before mounting his motorcycle and resuming his way home. Upon arriving home, Giovanni changed out of his work clothes, feeling rejuvenated not only by the rest that awaited him but also by the human warmth he shared with Mrs. Marissa that night. He turned on the television, but this time, the episode of his favorite series didn't seem as important as the comforting memories of the interaction with the lady and the gratitude in her eyes. Giovanni felt extremely satisfied. Helping the elderly woman and having a meaningful conversation made him feel useful and less lonely. The next day, he followed his morning routine of exercises and household chores. Since it was his day off, he planned to relax and, in the evening, visit Mr. Almeida. However, while watching a comedy show on TV, he heard a soft knock on the door. Surprised, as he wasn't expecting visitors, he got up from the sofa and went to the door, curious to find out who it could be. Upon opening the door, Giovanni found a small box on the ground next to a white envelope. There was no one in sight. He looked around, but the street was quiet, and everything seemed normal. Curious, he picked up the box and envelope and went back inside the house. He sat on the sofa and first examined the envelope. It was addressed to him in delicate, feminine handwriting. Giovanni carefully opened it and took out a handwritten letter. Dear Giovanni, I hope this message finds you well. I would like to thank you for your kindness and help yesterday. Your kindness did not go unnoticed and touched my heart. As a token of my gratitude, I have chosen a simple gift for you. I hope you like it and that it may be useful to you. With sincere thanks, Mrs. Marissa. Giovanni smiled as he read the kind words of the letter. It was comforting to know that his small action had made a difference to someone. Curious to see what was inside the box, he opened it carefully. Inside, he found a pair of new, well-cared-for leather gloves. They were exactly what he needed to ride his motorcycle with more comfort and safety. He picked up one of the gloves, feeling the softness of the leather between his fingers. What an amazing gift! Thank you, Mrs. Marissa, murmured Giovanni to himself, impressed by the lady's generosity. He carefully stored the letter and gloves, thinking about the night he helped the lady with the flat tire and how that had led to this unexpectedly sweet moment. With a smile on his lips, Giovanni felt grateful for the human connection that simple gesture had provided. Suddenly, Giovanni heard another knock on the door. When he opened it, he was greeted by a well-dressed man and two other men in suits and dark glasses standing beside a luxury Ferrari parked on the street. The man approached with a gentle smile and introduced himself as Mrs. Marissa's grandson. Good evening, Giovanni. My name is Eduardo, he said, extending his hand to shake Giovanni's. Giovanni shook Eduardo's hand, surprised by the unexpected encounter. Good evening, Eduardo. It's a pleasure to meet you. Eduardo continued, quickly explaining the reason for his visit. My grandmother was very grateful for your help. She told me about you and said that your kindness touched her deeply. Also, you remind her a lot of my late father. That's probably why she always took a few minutes to chat during pizza deliveries. Next to Eduardo, the two other men remained silent, observing the interaction with serious expressions. Eduardo then extended a second white envelope to Giovanni. In addition to the letter and the gloves, she asked me to deliver this anonymously to your door. But as I was leaving, I felt that I also needed to thank you for the gesture you made for my grandmother. Out of gratitude, please accept this. Giovanni looked at the envelope, unable to believe what he was seeing. Upon opening it, he found a large sum of money inside. Eduardo, I can't accept this. I helped your grandmother because it was the right thing to do, not for any reward, said Giovanni, trying to return the envelope. Eduardo smiled understandingly but insisted. I understand, Giovanni, but for my grandmother and me, this is important. She insists that it's a small way to repay your kindness. Please, accept it. After a moment of hesitation, Giovanni accepted the envelope with gratitude. Tell Mrs. Marissa that I'm very grateful for her generosity and that it was a pleasure to help her. Eduardo nodded, satisfied. I will tell her. Thank you again, Giovanni. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to contact me. Giovanni looked again at the envelope in his hands, thoughtful. The generosity of Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo touched him deeply, as did the trust she placed in him by sending that significant amount of money. In a gesture of reciprocity, he invited Eduardo in for coffee or something to eat, wanting to express his appreciation for their generosity. Please come in. Let me at least offer you a coffee. However, Eduardo politely declined. Thank you, Giovanni, but I really need to go, Eduardo said with a gentle smile. I'm glad I could help in some way. Before leaving, Eduardo casually mentioned, oh, before I forget, there's a job opening at Genome Solutions, my grandmother's company. Maybe it's a good opportunity for you to explore. She mentioned your dream of studying pharmacy and developing the patent for a patch. For now, it's just a job opening, but it could open doors. Giovanni was stunned. He had always dreamed of seeing his invention, the patch to help people combat addiction, being used to help others. The idea of working at Genome Solutions seemed like a distant dream, especially given the difficulties in securing an opportunity at a renowned company like that. Eduardo's words echoed in his mind, a job opening at Genome Solutions. This is incredible, murmured Giovanni to himself, feeling a wave of emotion and hope he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at the envelope that Mrs. Marissa had given him, still holding the generous amount of money. It was as if the universe was aligning things for him, bringing unexpected opportunities after so much time facing life's difficulties. With teary eyes, Giovanni thanked Eduardo again. I accept the opportunity, Eduardo. I don't even know what to say, he said, emotional. All right, Giovanni, be there in 2 days. After a cordial wave, Eduardo said goodbye and returned to the Ferrari, followed by the two men. Giovanni slowly closed the door, still processing what had just happened. Sitting back on the sofa, for the first time in many years, Giovanni allowed himself to cry tears of happiness. He felt that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. With renewed determination, he knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip by. Sitting in his small apartment, Giovanni began to plan his next steps. He took a piece of paper and a pen, starting to sketch ideas for his application to Genome Solutions. Each word he wrote was driven by the hope for a better future and the promise of fulfilling his great dream. As the night progressed, Giovanni felt a renewed energy within him. The gratitude for Mrs. Marissa, Eduardo's generosity, and the prospect of a new opportunity at Genome Solutions filled his heart with determination and faith in the future. Giovanni's life was about to take an exciting turn, and he was more than ready to embrace every moment of this unexpected journey that lay ahead of him. 2 days later, Giovanni had a job interview at Genome Solutions and was approved. In the following months, his life underwent a radical transformation. With Mrs. Marissa's generosity, he was able to move to a better neighborhood, taking Mr. Almeida with him. The new house provided more space and comfort, creating an environment where everyone could live with more dignity and tranquility. At Genome Solutions, Giovanni found not just a job but a new passion. He dedicated himself entirely to his role, getting involved in projects that challenged him intellectually and inspired him to grow professionally. The company offered a stimulating environment and resources for him to develop his skills. Besides professional success, Giovanni discovered new friendships. Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo remained close, inviting him to family dinners and special events, making him feel part of the family. Giovanni shared laughter and stories with them. Mrs. Marissa always commented on how Giovanni reminded her of her late son. During one of these dinners at Mrs. Marissa's house, Eduardo approached Giovanni with a serious expression. Giovanni, have you thought about exploring new opportunities within Genome? Eduardo asked, pouring wine for the guests. Giovanni considered the question for a moment before answering. Yes, I have been thinking about it. Genome has been incredible for me, but there is much more I could do. Eduardo nodded, encouraging him. You have so many talents, Giovanni. Perhaps there are other ways to use your skills to help more people. Giovanni's eyes lit up with the possibility. Yes, I would love to find a way to do that. Eduardo smiled thoughtfully. I'll keep an eye out for opportunities that may arise. Who knows what we might discover together? Throughout the rest of the night, Giovanni reflected on his conversation with Eduardo. He felt he was just beginning to realize the potential of his abilities and the positive impact he could have on the world. He thought about mentioning his patent as an opportunity for growth, but preferred to wait for Eduardo to bring it up. As the months passed, Giovanni threw himself into his work at Genome and began exploring new ways to apply his skills beyond the company's boundaries. He was determined to find a way to make a real difference in the lives of those around him, knowing that each step brought him closer to his goal of contributing to a better world. More and more, Giovanni stood out at Genome's solutions, demonstrating dedication and gratitude for every opportunity that arose. Because of this, Mrs. Marissa offered him a scholarship to study pharmacy. With the generous scholarship, he was finally able to realize an old dream. His studies complemented his practical experience at the company, allowing him to deepen his knowledge and contribute even more significantly to the business. Genome invested in Giovanni's training, recognizing his potential and commitment. Quickly, he rose to new positions within the company, taking on greater responsibilities and actively participating in innovative projects. The financial stability and positive work environment not only strengthened his self-esteem but also renewed his vision of a promising future. Meanwhile, Mr. Almeida continued to be his unwavering support pillar, always present to offer wise advice and encouragement. He was a constant presence in Giovanni's life, and in gratitude for the help over the years, Giovanni spared no effort to repay him, assisting Mr. Almeida financially and sharing good times together. Besides stability and professional growth, Giovanni's new life brought new friendships and a happier, healthier routine. He found a balance between work and personal life, dedicating time to activities that brought him joy and well-being, such as his morning exercises. Weekends were often spent with Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo, sharing warm meals and enriching stories that strengthened the bonds of friendship and gratitude. As the years passed, Giovanni felt an increasing need to venture into new possibilities beyond Genome. The approval of his patent was still the biggest dream of his life, and perhaps he was ready to pursue it. His passion for pharmacy and research inspired him to explore new paths to contribute even more in the field of health and well-being. The work at Genome Solutions demanded more and more time, and he needed to dedicate himself to the position that had been generously entrusted to him. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and Giovanni embraced each one with determination and gratitude for the gift life had given him. One day, while at work, Giovanni received an unexpected call on his cell phone. The number was not saved, but something told him it was important to answer. Upon hearing the voice on the other end, his heart leaped. It was Laura, his eldest daughter, with whom he hadn't had contact for years. "Hi, Dad, it's Laura," she said, with a mix of hesitation and emotion in her voice. Giovanni could hardly believe what he was hearing. He cleared his throat and responded carefully. "Laura, my daughter, how are you?" The conversation was filled with uncomfortable silences and carefully chosen words. Laura explained that she had learned about the positive changes in Giovanni's life through a mutual friend. She had resisted for a long time but finally decided to try to reconnect. Giovanni felt a mix of relief and joy at hearing his daughter's voice, but also deep sadness for the memories of the lost years. He arranged a meeting for the following week at a cafe near where Laura lived. On the day of the meeting, Giovanni was nervous. He wore his best clothes and arrived early at the cafe, waiting anxiously until he saw Laura enter the door. She was much older, but the same shy smile from her childhood was still there. The two hugged cautiously, as if still testing the waters. They sat down and started talking about trivial things at first, but gradually the conversation deepened. Laura talked about her life, her challenges, and successes. Giovanni shared about his work at Genome Solutions, his relationship with Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo, and how Mr. Almeida continued to be his constant support and helped him overcome addiction. Suddenly, Laura brought up a delicate subject that Giovanni could never have anticipated. "Now Mateus and I live with Grandma. Mom abandoned us to live in another country with a wealthy businessman she met on a cruise." Giovanni couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's terrible, Laura. Please, if there's any way I can help, let me know. If you need a place to stay, my house is always open," he said. "It's okay, Dad. No problem. We're doing well at Grandma's house," Laura replied. The hours flew by, and before they knew it, it was late. Laura held Giovanni's hand and said sincerely, "Dad, I missed you so much all these years. I was so afraid to try to get hurt again, but now I'm happy to be here." Giovanni looked into Laura's eyes and saw the same pain and regret he felt. "I missed you too, Laura, more than words can express." They agreed to rebuild their relationship slowly, with patience and forgiveness. Giovanni realized that despite the lost time, there was still room for a new beginning between them. Slowly, Giovanni managed to re-establish contact with his other son. After the emotional reunion with Laura, he felt encouraged to reconnect with his younger son, Mateus. Laura and Mateus had their own stories and wounds from the past, but Giovanni was determined to rebuild the broken family ties. On a sunny Saturday, Giovanni invited them for lunch at his new home. Laura and Mateus had shy smiles and curious eyes as they met Mrs. Marissa, Eduardo, and Mr. Almeida. Giovanni's house was full of life and expectation that day. Seated at the dining room table, Giovanni proudly explained how each of his friends had been instrumental in his journey of transformation. Mr. Almeida, the oldest friend who helped him overcome addiction, as well as Mrs. Marissa with her warm kindness and Eduardo with his contagious enthusiasm. The three welcomed Giovanni's children with genuine affection. The conversation flowed naturally, mixing stories from the past with plans for the future. As the lunch progressed, Giovanni noticed how genuinely happy his children were for him. They saw the change in their father, not just externally, with financial stability and the welcoming environment of the new home, but also internally, with a peace and a spark of joy they hadn't seen in a long time. Laura shared her career dreams in the health field, while Mateus told funny stories about school. Giovanni laughed along with them, feeling grateful to be present in his children's lives again. He realized that despite the lost time, there was a chance to build new memories and strengthen family bonds. After lunch, Giovanni talked privately with Laura and Mateus. He expressed his regret for past absences and thanked them for being willing to start over. Laura and Mateus, in turn, shared their own struggles, but also expressed gratitude for having the opportunity to rebuild their relationship with their father. In the following months, family gatherings at Giovanni's house became a regular event. Weekends were filled with laughter, old stories being relived, and new ones being created. Giovanni felt blessed to have a second chance to be a present father. And so, amidst hugs, heartfelt conversations, and shared joy, Giovanni found not only forgiveness and reconciliation but also a renewed sense of purpose and happiness in his life. One day, sitting in his favorite armchair, Giovanni decided to share a story he had kept in his heart for a long time. "You know, my children, my life hasn't always been easy," he began, looking at each of their attentive faces before him. "But there was a crucial moment that changed everything. It was the night I helped an old acquaintance with a flat tire." The curious looks from Laura and Mateus encouraged Giovanni to continue. He vividly described how he often delivered pizzas to Mrs. Marissa's mansion and one day found her on a dark street, struggling to change the tire. "I almost didn't stop. I was tired and just wanted to go home, Giovanni confessed. But something made me stop at that moment, and it was the best decision I ever made. He narrated how Mrs. Marissa and her grandson Eduardo became part of his life, how the small conversations and gestures of gratitude led to new opportunities and ultimately to his complete transformation. That night was the turning point, Giovanni continued, with a serene smile. Since then, I've received more than I could ever imagine: love, a new career, and most importantly, the reunion with you. Laura and Mateus listened in silence, absorbing every word. They shared hugs and expressions of affection with their father, recognizing the journey he had traveled to reach this moment of peace and happiness. As the night wore on, Giovanni realized that despite the difficulties of the past, the present had brought them a new chance to build stronger and truer bonds. He felt deep gratitude for Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo, whose simple gesture of gratitude had triggered a chain of events that transformed not only his life but also that of his children. On that special night, amidst laughter, tears, and warm hugs, Giovanni and his children celebrated the bright future that awaited the family, which had been united by generosity and compassion. With his life stabilized and his children close, Giovanni decided it was time to give back the kindness he had received. He began volunteering at rehabilitation centers, where he shared his story of overcoming and offered emotional support to those struggling with addiction. Giovanni felt fulfilled by being able to help others in the same way someone had helped him. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Giovanni was at the rehabilitation center, talking to a young man named Marcio. Marcio was the same age as Giovanni when he began his journey to recovery. Sitting on a bench in the center's garden, Giovanni listened attentively as Marcio shared his struggles and fears. "I feel like I can never change, you know?" Marcio said, looking at the ground. Giovanni placed a sympathetic hand on Marcio's shoulder. "I know how it is, Marcio. I once thought that way too, but look at me now. There's always a chance to change and turn things around." Marcio looked into Giovanni's eyes, seeing the sincerity in his words. "But how did you do it? How did you manage to leave everything behind and start over?" Giovanni smiled gently. "It wasn't easy, Marcio. It was one step at a time. Sometimes, help comes from where we least expect it. A neighbor, Mr. Almeida, was always very important to me, but what really changed my life was a night when I stopped to help an elderly woman with her flat tire." Marcio leaned forward, interested. "What happened?" Giovanni began to tell the story of the night that changed his life, how a simple choice to stop and help someone led to a series of events that transformed his life for the better. As he spoke, he saw hope shine in Marcio's eyes, a glimmer that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Days later, while Giovanni was at home relaxing, he received an unexpected call. It was from a lawyer representing an innovative pharmaceutical technology company. The lawyer explained that the company was interested in buying the rights to a patent Giovanni had developed years ago but never had the resources to pursue. The offer was generous, and Giovanni could hardly believe his luck. He accepted the offer, happy to finally have the opportunity to see his patch, designed to help people with addiction, used to help others. After hanging up the phone, Giovanni remained silent for a few moments, trying to process the unexpected turn his life had just taken. The patent for the patch, which had always seemed like a distant dream, was now about to become a reality. As he looked out the window, watching the city lights flickering in the distance, Giovanni thought about the years of hard work at the pizzeria, the sleepless nights as he tried to perfect his idea, and the many times he thought about giving up. But something inside him always pushed him to keep going, believing that one day he would have his chance. With a deep sigh, Giovanni picked up a notebook and a pen, sitting at the kitchen table. He began to make quick sketches, jotting down new ideas that came to mind. The excitement and determination he hadn't felt in a long time now propelled him forward. However, he knew the path wouldn't be easy. Selling the patent would mean more than just money, it would represent the recognition of his creativity and hard work. As thoughts swirled in his mind, Giovanni realized this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The sale of the patent could be the starting point for many other positive changes he could hardly imagine. The next morning, the biggest surprise came when Giovanni discovered that the company interested in his patent was actually Genome Solutions, owned by Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo. They had discovered Giovanni's patent during his first conversation with Mrs. Marissa, but waited until he had made a significant change to invest in the project. When Giovanni confronted Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo about it, they admitted that this was their primary idea of repaying the kindness Giovanni had shown by helping Mrs. Marissa with the tyre, but they needed time to be sure that the investment would bring financial returns both for them and Giovanni. The man was speechless, deeply moved by the generosity and care of the two. The revelation brought a new dimension to Giovanni's relationship with Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo. Besides friends and confidants, they were now also partners in a project that promised to transform not only Giovanni's life but also contribute to significant advances in the field of technology. With the financial support of Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo's company, Giovanni finally had the resources he needed to start developing the patent for his patch. He spent hours dedicated to the work, immersed in calculations, experiments, and prototypes. With each advance, he eagerly shared it with Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo, who closely followed each step of the process. As the project progressed, Giovanni didn't lose sight of his commitment to the community. He continued to volunteer at rehabilitation centers, inspiring others with his story of overcoming adversity. With each visit, he realized the impact his presence and words had on those struggling to rebuild their lives. Mrs. Marissa, always attentive to Giovanni's well-being, encouraged him to maintain a balance between his work and his social commitment. She frequently reminded him of the importance of taking care of himself, something Giovanni, with his dedicated nature, sometimes neglected. Meanwhile, Eduardo worked behind the scenes to ensure all legal and administrative aspects of the project were in order. His experience and skills perfectly complemented Giovanni's enthusiasm and ingenuity. As months passed, Giovanni's project began to attract attention, not only for its innovation but also for its potential market impact. New investors started to show interest, and Giovanni found himself facing new opportunities and challenges. After successfully developing the patent, Giovanni found himself facing an exciting new chapter in his life. With the financial resources obtained from the transaction, he was finally able to realize a dream that once seemed unattainable, starting his own company. Mr. Almeida, his faithful friend and confidant over the years, was the first to whom Giovanni offered the opportunity to be his partner. With enthusiasm and a sincere smile, Mr. Almeida accepted, ready to embark on this new adventure alongside Giovanni. Soon after, he offered the partnership to Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo, who also accepted the offer with enthusiasm but said that the company's management would be solely Giovanni and Mr. Almeida's responsibility. Together, they founded the company BioCare Research. The goal was not just to profit but also to positively impact the community. Inspired by his own journey of recovery and redemption, Giovanni decided that BioCare Research would be an inclusive space, offering jobs to people overcoming addiction and personal difficulties. He firmly believed that everyone deserved a second chance in life, just as he had received. Mrs. Marissa and Eduardo not only supported the idea but were extremely happy that Giovanni was taking an important step in his life as an entrepreneur. They understood that BioCare Research would not be a competitor but a sister company to Genome Solutions. In the first months of operation, BioCare research faced challenges and learning experiences. Giovanni and Mr. Almeida worked tirelessly to establish the company in the market, leveraging the experience and network of contacts Giovanni had built over the years. Giovanni applied his technical knowledge and passion for innovation to every project, while Mr. Almeida wisely managed the company's financial and administrative aspects. BioCare Research's reputation grew rapidly as its products began to gain recognition for their quality and innovation. Giovanni and Mr. Almeida celebrated each achievement not only as businessmen but as friends who had faced many challenges together over the years. As the BioCare research team grew, Giovanni and Mr. Almeida often found themselves reminiscing about their past experiences and looking to the future with renewed hope. The company was not just a commercial enterprise, it was an extension of the values and life philosophy they both deeply embraced. Over time, Giovanni focused on expanding the company and exploring new market opportunities, while Mr. Almeida played a crucial role in developing corporate social responsibility programs. They were determined to ensure that BioCare research not only prospered financially but also played an active role in improving the local community. In this new chapter of their lives, Giovanni and Mr. Almeida discovered deep satisfaction and meaning in their work. The journey that began with Giovanni's simple act of kindness towards Mrs. Marissa had transformed into a story of overcoming adversity, friendship, and transformative opportunities for them and those around them. With the success of BioCare research and the personal fulfillment it brought, Giovanni found himself in a place he never imagined reaching. Each day was a new opportunity for him to expand his company and strengthen the bonds he had formed throughout his journey. The mornings began with the vibrant energy of the BioCare research team, where Giovanni took pride in leading a group of talented and committed professionals. Giovanni and Mr. Almeida worked side by side, guiding the company with integrity and passion, always remembering their humble beginnings and the transformative power of a simple act of kindness. As the years passed, Giovanni continued to practice gratitude, always remembering the difficult moments that led him to this point. He regularly visited the rehabilitation center where he had started his journey as a volunteer, offering words of encouragement and support to those struggling to find their way. His story inspired not only those who knew his journey but also many others who heard about his determination and compassion. This is how Giovanni finally found the inner peace he had long sought. Each day was a gift, and he lived with a deep sense of purpose and love for life. With the success of the company, he had more and more time to spend with his children, Laura and Mateus. He knew there was always more to be done to help others and make the world a better place. With his faith in humanity restored and his heart full of gratitude, Giovanni looked to the future with hope and joy, ready to face any challenge that life might bring. I hope you enjoyed this story full of twists and emotions. If you liked it and want more exciting narratives like this, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the Stories Life channel. Here, each story is a new adventure, and we are always ready to surprise you. Also leave your comment on what you thought of the story and suggestions for future narratives. See you next time.